Everyone knows therapy is great for solving problems, but getting therapy has its own problems too, like finding the right therapist, fitting into their schedule, and of course, the cost. Well, BetterHelp can solve those problems. It's totally online and built around your schedule. It's surprisingly affordable too. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat, all from the comfort of your home. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% on your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.
I would dread getting on that bus. I would be kicked, I would be abused verbally, all of those things. You lose everything. I lost jobs, I lost house, I lost car. You know, when you're sort of rummaging around in a settee, taking off cushions in the hope that some coins have slipped down behind and that you'll be able to go to the local off licence and get another bottle of wine.
We're going to start today, Mary, with a quote from our guest. And this is it. The first piece of advice that I would give to my younger self would be, don't even think about having that first drink. This is a person who has experienced firsthand the impact of alcohol in life, of alcoholism.
Well, you're certainly right about the power of the words. They're very powerful. I don't need to tell anybody in Ireland how ubiquitous alcohol is, what role it plays in Irish life, and indeed in the stereotype very often unfairly of the Irish and alcohol consumption. But as somebody who was, born and reared into the pub scene, and that's what I grew up with, was the pub. Mm-hmm. I know that there's positive sides to it, and I also know the very negative sides to it. And I'm hoping, and maybe our guest will be able to shed some light on this, I'm hoping the younger generation will have a more balanced view when it comes to drinking, though, of course, they have the other problem that I never knew growing up, which was the drugs problem. So
that's true.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, a nice drink, particularly in social settings, can facilitate relaxation, bonding. It's very relaxing. But these positives can often be overshadowed by the huge negative consequences associated with excessive use and addiction.
Well, that's exactly where the problems now arise, and there's nobody knows more than our guest, with whom we're going to explore the story behind that first lovely quotation, maybe that very poignant quotation you gave us at the start. We're going to be talking to the remarkable Noel Cunningham, and Noel's going to take us hopefully through his early experiences and particularly when he realised that alcohol was essentially consuming his life. And then the battle, very hard battle, but thankfully a won battle to get his life back. And Noel, as we know, because he's a great friend to both of us, mm-hmm. He's more than just that battle, that's for sure.
Oh, that is for sure. Let's go through it. Noel is a hotelier, TV and radio contributor, regular on RT's Today Show, an author, and Donegal treasure. And everybody knows him as the Donegal man who always has a smile on his face, warmth in his heart, and is always beautifully turned out. And today is no exception. Noel Cunningham, you are very, very welcome to Allenwood, and you look $1 million, as always.
Well, thank you both for inviting me. I am really honoured. I will tell you truthfully, I rang my sister as I drove down these beautiful country lanes that took me to this gorgeous studio. And I said to Caroline, my goodness, what would our mother have thought 28 years ago when I was in a very different place, looking down today, and I'm on my way to speak to Mary Kennedy, who was one of her idols. And the President of Ireland, Mary McAleese. I am sure that maybe on one of the rare occasions she would allow herself to say, "Oh, I am proud," because I don't think it's something in my generation that parents were disposed toward praise or, that sort of little encouragement.
No, that's true. And maybe therein sometimes lies the problem, for many people who grew up without affirmation in their lives, and possibly even the opposite of it. But Mary has already mentioned how incredibly elegantly dressed you are. And honestly, the two of us are a disgrace by comparison with you. It is a good job that this is not on television.
No way.
But actually, it's a pity it's not, because just to see Noel, we were saying earlier, which of your many outfits would you wear today? I had my money on the purple velvet, actually, but I was completely wrong. But I tell you, McGee's definitely are proud of you today. Now, McGee's of Donegal. Noel, Mary and I were both at your birthday party last year, and it was a big roundy birthday. Am I allowed to say that?
You most certainly are.
How did you feel about turning 70?
I probably live my life today trying in every way to be full of gratitude. It didn't occur to me to think anything other than that I was so lucky, so blessed and so privileged that I was there to celebrate my 70th birthday, and that I was surrounded by only the people that I care for very deeply. There wasn't a single person in that room that I didn't want so much to be there. And I have learned so harshly, perhaps is the way to put it, and so really, really painfully, that for me, age is irrelevant, because I was dying for so long that now I am living. It doesn't matter the zeros or the numbers. It's about life and about living in the day, which is a huge part of our program as a recovering alcoholic. I don't tend to give too much concern maybe or thought to tomorrow, other than for practical things that have to be considered. But I have to live in today, because like a lot of Irish people, you could allow your thoughts to wander. Will I never be able to enjoy a bottle of wine again? Will I never be able to enjoy Christmas the way I used to? Will I never be able to go to a family wedding and join in the celebrations? And then I correct myself and sort of remind myself that that is because we have that drink culture, which is still very much part of our everyday life, that we need alcohol in order to live, to enjoy, to have fun, to be sociable. Yes, as Mary Kennedy, you said, it's a lovely part of life, and it does help in all of those social sort of environments to relax us and make us a little bit more talkative, and to make us enjoy ourselves that little bit more if we are sort of tend to be a little bit more reticent. But by glory and honour, our relationship with alcohol is incredibly negative at times.
And Noel, where did it start for you? Was it, when you were very young? Was it an escape? Was there a reason why you began to drink heavily?
I had an aunt who held that in all of us there is a chemical imbalance, and that for some of us, once we feed that enough alcohol, that it will react in a negative way, leading us down a path toward alcoholism and dependency. I can honestly say that my own pain as a young person growing up contributed to my trying to find a release from that. And I found that release in alcohol. And it's a long, long time ago since my uncle was coming home from America. And as was the way they did it in those days, there was a great party because they came in frequently. Mm-hmm. And, they would gather in the home where they were born, and that happened to be my father's home then and is now my home. And sure, you would go to the local pub and you'd get a couple of crates of Phoenix and a couple of crates of Guinness. There'd be a couple of bottles of whiskey. And I remember my mother finding me out at the back of the wall around the side of the house, as we would have said. And I was draining the dregs out of some of the beer bottles.
What age were you then?
I was probably only 9 or 10, but I was doing that for a reason. I was doing that because even at that early stage, I felt different.
Why?
Because probably now, in my 70th year, that I was gay. I was sensitive. I had no interest in Gaelic football. I had no interest in the farm. I had no interest in all of those things that were almost compulsory indicators that we were men, we were macho, we were Irish, we were, not sissies. And that word, it still haunts me, And that has lived with me to this day. And to this day, I still have to, when I go to Mass, I still have to count to 3 as I go through that door and say, please just get me into my seat. That sort of thing still lives, because I used to come home on holiday and I would go to Mass, and I used to dread coming down the chapel lane because of those who would, it would be considered abuse, And
would they, tell us what they would say? Would they throw words at you?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the words you couldn't use,
Unless you were the Pope.
Absolutely. They just used dreadful, inappropriate words and
how did you
crude
feel?
Words.
How did you feel when you heard those?
You were dying inside anyway. I mean, I can honestly say that for 40 years of my life, I was not happy.
And was your
I had
family
no
aware
peace.
of that, Noel?
That's sometimes where you have to be careful to distinguish between a non-supportive family and a family who were just off their time, a family who lived in an environment in a rural area where boys were meant to be boys, and the manual labour side of life were the boys. And even, at school, the master might even take out some of those boys to help on the farm at times. And of course, again, I would be the only one left behind. I would be the only one left in the room. And that, of course, gave further ammunition to those after school, when you made your way to the school bus in Kilcar, that would just not only verbally but physically abuse you too. And I lived with that.
The misery of that just strikes me at that age as the very kind of misery. It can still be visited on young people, and still is visited on young people, and is one of the reasons why the people who are at most risk of either suicide attempts or suicide itself are still our young, particularly our young gay men, young gay boys. Did you ever contemplate suicide in the middle of all that?
Well, many years ago, Mary Kennedy sat in my sitting room and we had a lovely chat about those days.
For Nationwide?
Yes, for Nationwide. And my goodness, the response was extraordinary, and it was so heartening for me that I was able to verbalise a lot of what they perhaps had lived with or was part of some of their families' lives. I was lucky insofar as, my father probably went to his grave not really understanding that a person was gay or what a gay person was. I mean, that's extraordinary for a man who, had the Irish Times delivered, dropped off the bus at the bottom of our lane. But we forget as well that in those days it wasn't discussed, it wasn't in print, it wasn't on the radio.
What year did your daddy die?
My father died, my father's dead now almost 30 years.
But even 30 years ago, I mean, gay rights had started here in the 1970s.
Yes, but we
had it passed him by?
Yes, because he was of his generation in rural Ireland. He had never had any great desire, unlike my mother, to travel because circumstances dictated. A man who wanted to become a teacher. His mother and father both died unexpectedly and young. with a couple of 100 acres of useless land, and he was caught. And he had to make the best of it. Trapped unbelievably. And as I say, the last thing he did at night was read the paper. But he didn't probably want to think about gay people or perhaps their struggles because of his own gentility. And, so it was also a time when parents, you didn't go home and say that you were abused or that you were verbally abused or that the Moonchor, gave you a good few slaps around the head. You just didn't, because your parents, your mum would question, well, why? You must have done something wrong.
What about your siblings? Because how many of you are there in the family?
I still say we are 6. My older brother passed away some years ago. He got cancer and died. And my slightly older sister, she was my Irish twin, she died very tragically in a car accident with her husband. So there are 4 of us.
Growing up, Noel, were they aware? Any way you could talk to them about how you felt?
Absolutely not. In later years, my sister who died in the car accident, she and I would probably have arrived at a situation where we could talk more openly, perhaps as we are talking now. But growing up, no. Growing up, certainly not. And then I went away to school. So when I was at those, what I call maybe difficult teenage years, I was away.
Where did you go?
I went down to Rockwell.
And we're talking Rockwell, the religious establishment.
Absolutely.
Good Lord, what was it like there? Because all boys schools in those days, kids were bullied and abused. Did you experience that there?
Thank God, no.
Whoa,
that's
interesting.
And I have to say, I was blessed to meet some extraordinary men when I was there. Father Lahan was our president, and up until the day he died, he still kept in touch. He showed me such kindness and such respect, something I was unused to. I wasn't used to that. And at no time, and I have to stress that, at no time would there have been a suggestion of anything improper. And I have to say...
That's a wonderful story.
Yes.
Because God knows you'd had enough hassle in your life. What about the fact then of being gay? Was there any notion of that or mention of that, or particularly among the other boys? Would you have heard the awful corner boy language you had heard back home?
Isn't it strange? Even as a teenager, that just didn't occur to me. You were so engrossed in enjoying a little bit of happiness that you hadn't experienced at home. Because remember, just to sort of give you the picture, my late sister Mary and I, we would get up at 5:45 in the morning, 5:45. At 6 a.m, my father had cajoled the mail car driver to take us from our home to a point almost near Carrick, which was a half an hour drive away. We would walk then from that point down through the fields to my uncle's house. We would spend a couple of hours there with just Mary and I, because the children wouldn't have been up at that stage. Then they would get up and we would walk a further half hour to the school. My mother had taken Mary and I out of our local school to send us to that school, which was in the Gaeltacht, and because the Moonchor had a reputation as being strict and a good teacher. When school finished at 3 o'clock, we would walk another 40 minutes from there out to the village of Kilcar. And there we would get the tech bus. And if I told you that over those years that I was at that school, I would dread getting on that bus. I would be kicked, I would be abused verbally, all of those things. And I must add, I now carry no ill will or bitterness. I have in fact met some of those tormentors and I have challenged them, but in a nice way. Mm-hmm. And the extraordinary thing is that some of them have had to come to me to seek help and advice because their own children were in the exact same predicament that I was in many years before. And we all think and we all believe, and we want to believe, that we are so forward-thinking and so liberal and so fabulous, and we are so tolerant and we're so amazing, and we stood at Dublin Castle and we clapped ourselves on the back and said, how marvellous we are. Oh, we're a beacon of hope in Europe for the gay community. If you gave me $1 million, Mary Kennedy and Mary McAleese, I would not walk through Temple Bar tonight for love nor money, because I would be abused. And
Tonight in Dublin.
Dear
God.
And I would be fearful of walking any other part of the city, fearful for my physical health.
Safety.
Safety.
The corner boys are still there.
No doubt about it.
Tell me how you felt. If you feel you can, tell me about how you felt in recent times to hear Pope Francis in a so-called closed session, and then repeat the word in a so-called closed session a few weeks later, use a dreadful word, the word faggot, which is, corner boy, locker room vulgarity, and pure, simple homophobic language. How did you feel?
It probably just kind of supports my own belief that we want to believe we've come so far, and there are those who believe we have, whereas in fact we haven't. And for me, the deep feeling when I read, first of all, and was almost prepared to give the benefit of the doubt, to have it confirmed by a later statement that that sort of language seemed commonplace. I just felt hurt. I felt belittled, and I felt some of probably the sadness of my own growing up resurface, because that's what I grew up with. That was 60 years ago, for God's sake. The hypocrisy of it all, because sadly, or not sadly, sadly for the Pope, that he didn't realise, and they, in some cases, are probably hypocritical enough not to, defend gay people, that his audience, a large number of them, were probably gay as well.
Anyway.
Yes.
Do you know what's interesting though, Noel? We both know you as a man of faith and of religious observance. You would always go to Mass. You're a wonderful man for lighting candles, and thank you for that over the years when we all have a little bit of trouble in our lives. How does that sit? How does the Catholic faith and observance sit with you, given the way gay people have been treated by the Church?
That's a wonderful question, because I find a lot of people use any excuse now to justify their own sort of behaviour, why they don't do something, or why they don't sort of maybe go to Mass, or why they don't support this or support that. I know that my God is all-loving. I know that God accepts me, and I know that God looks unkindly on those who have made the rules. They're all man-made. All the dialogue is by predominantly men, and therefore I have no problem with going to Mass and having a relationship with my God. And I also have no problem with recognizing the great priests and the great women and men in the Church who down the years have done extraordinary work. And I just think it's such a sadness that we have, as we sort of spoke about a few minutes ago, that situation where a pope can think it's all right behind closed doors to refer to our community in such a nasty, vulgar, horrible way.
It must be so frustrating and so difficult for you personally.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of people of faith.
I was going to say it's very difficult for men and women who are good people, who are spiritual people, and who would like to make their contribution and who would like to feel included in the church, to be part of it, you know, this inclusiveness and this community that can be a power for good. And many of them, they probably feel alienated and cut off from the church. And that's a tremendous sadness.
You can understand it in a way. I mean, this is a man who purports to be the vicar of Christ. The truth of the matter is, if he was a CEO of any major organisation, or a Taoiseach, or a Prime Minister, head of a university, in any other sphere, using that language, they'd be gone.
Yes.
They'd be out the door, right? That would be the public clamour for the office itself, you know, for the dignity of the office itself.
The church can leave you isolated in that way.
Yes.
In a very real way. And then going back to your question, Mary Kennedy, about drinking, when you are so hurt and when you are doing everything to please people, to be loved, to crying out in pain, to be wanted, and when you don't have the confidence because it's been knocked out of you, you feel unworthy of living almost, that drink was a great friend in those early days.
And how did that progress?
I spent a couple of years with Jury's Hotel Group here in Ireland. Then I was headhunted for London. And one of the biggest mistakes an addict makes, I suppose, not just a recovering alcoholic, you think that if you run, you can hide or things will be better.
You can reinvent.
Absolutely, reinvent. But you know, you never can. Then in London,
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.
You almost felt dirty. You felt kind of just so different to the point that you were unworthy of anything. So the drink helped because it gave you that little bit of confidence. So if you were going out for a night, you would throw down a few in order to make you the life and soul of the party so that people would start taking notice of you almost. And then that continues until you reach a point, and it's hard to define when you stop being a person who had a drink for the right reasons when you're dependent on having that drink. I never took drink just to enjoy. I took drink because there was a reason for it.
And how bad did it get, Noel?
Oh, Mary Kennedy, drink brings you to the depths of despair. You lose everything.
Did you lose jobs? Did you lose friends?
I lost friends, I lost jobs, I lost house, I lost car. You know, when you're sort of rummaging around in a settee, taking off cushions in the hope that some coins have slipped down behind and that you'll be able to go to the local off license and get another bottle of wine. You know, when you're getting up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you're drinking a couple of bottles of wine, and then you're brushing your teeth 40 times, and you're only fooling yourself, you see. And you do that so successfully.
Had you any friends, good friends or family at that time who would have said to you, Noel, you're killing yourself?
No, because you're clever enough, you stay away from such exposure. I mentioned the fact that my beloved sister and her husband were killed in a car accident, which was a huge sadness for me in my life, and still is a great sadness. And what made it sort of even greater was the fact that I was away at that time, and my mother was celebrating her birthday, a significant birthday. But as the alcoholic does, I did not want to waste hard come by money on a flight home and to be exposed to maybe families saying, oh, is he drinking? So I chose not to come. And you become very, very sort of versed in telling lies and living a lie. So I wasn't home. And travelling home from my mother's birthday, my sister and her husband, the children, and my other sister was in the car too. It was a whole sequence of events around it that they were all crammed into one car, and yet it saved some of their lives in the end. But they were killed outright, my sister and her husband. And, you know, to live with that, and I still have difficulty living with that, you know.
I wouldn't.
Because you think, you know, that I didn't come home. If I had been home, you know, death brings all kinds of questions. Could I have done something, or would things have been different? Would they have stayed down a little bit longer? Would they have not met those Italians coming out of Donegal town on the wrong side of the road? But to answer you, Mary McAleese, and your question about having someone who would actually have the courage to tell you you're destroying, you're killing yourself. A year later, I returned for my sister and her husband's anniversary mass, and afterwards we went to a local pub restaurant for a bite to eat. And my niece, Tanya, she was only a child herself. And remember, she and her brother and sister had just lost their parents. She said, "Uncle Noel, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." So she brought me round to a quiet part down at the back of the bar, and she said, "Please stop drinking."
Wow.
Gosh.
How did you feel that day?
Oh, like I'm
Even
feeling now. You know?
very
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
Yes, gosh.
Yeah.
She didn't want to lose you. She'd lost her mum and dad.
Yeah. That, I mean, if you took, as we used to say, my mother used to say, "I'll get a red hot poker to you." If you stuck a red hot poker through one's heart, the pain wouldn't have been more acute, you know. And yet,
Did it help?
it was a turning point. Oh my goodness, yes.
Was it?
Yeah,
Was it?
Absolutely. That was the beginning.
Good woman, Tanya.
The beginning of a life beyond our wildest dreams, you know, where you get your life back. And all of my nephews and nieces, all of my family, I was estranged from all of them really without realising it. I had no relationship. I believe that she was merely a messenger for my late sister.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did you negotiate the recovery then? Because that can't have been easy either, Noel.
It's something we hear all the time, that it has to begin with you. You have to want to get sober. That wasn't quite the way it was with me. I didn't want to get sober, but the depth of my shame and at what my beloved niece said to me was so direct and hurtful and painful that I knew I had to do something. And then, as sometimes happens, all the wonderful people that I required at that very difficult time were thrown in my path. And I mean literally thrown in my path. Strangers, you know, strange things happened for a number of months that should never have happened. People, you know, like a man that I had never met, that I would have barely known. And when I was dragged screaming and shouting to my first AA meeting, he came to me afterwards. He said, "I've waited for years for you to come through that door." And he took me under his wing, and he was nothing short of extraordinary, because he'd been on a very similar journey. And then my wonderful friend Patricia, she was my mentor and my sponsor for a number of years, and she had the greatest gift in helping people on that road to recovery. And you'll try to learn that lesson, that one day at a time.
Noel, is it difficult for you to remember all of that we've been speaking about now?
Extremely hard, because it's part of the healing process as well as the suffering, because You see, I'm kind of finding it a little bit hard because you're reliving, you know, an awful time. Awful. And yes, but with that pain comes the healing as well. And every time you talk about it, you're helping yourself as well, because you're also reminding yourself that you weren't kind to people either during those times. And part of our recovery is making amends and giving back, you know, and, you know, I have to recognize when I find it so easy to say the negatives that affected me toward a point where I was dependent on alcohol, I have to be mindful of the fact too of those around me that saw what was going on in my behaviour and that I let them down too. So talking about that helps as part of that. And people who listen, and it's nice for people who hear me talk, and that's also meant to be. I believe everything's meant to be.
And my goodness, your life since and now has been extraordinary, full of energy, full of enterprise, full of love and kindness. You know, when you compare the two, you must be delighted with yourself.
Great success.
Yes.
And great success.
You know, it's a uniquely Irish thing, perhaps in general, but if you've been in a dark place or been an alcoholic, you carry that fear too. You know, you're almost afraid to be happy. But I am at a point now that I'm allowing myself to sit on the steps and look at the ocean and the garden and say to myself for the first time in 40 or 50 years, as the French say, je suis content, I am content. I have a contentment about me.
I look at your life, Noel, which I think by any stretch of the imagination is just wonderful. Wonderful how you have turned your life around, and then the generosity of wanting to share that journey so that others can either avoid it or, if they're in it, can, you know, in the misery of alcoholism, can believe that there is a route out. But I'm also very conscious that I do come across regularly gay people, you know, that stayed in the so-called closet, who didn't have the joy that a lot of the young people now do have, despite all the things that you have identified of the ongoing misery of bullying. But they do know that 2/3 of the people out there voted to give them the right to marry. So the openness of that, do you feel lost a bit, that you that left you behind, didn't it?
Yes, but I can't dwell. I have to look forward, and if I have a mission in life, it's to present an image of the 70+ member of a community who were most certainly downtrodden and battered and abused and treated so badly, and that somehow or other, no more than being an alcoholic, that message that both of you alluded to, you can turn that corner, you can, you know, have a life beyond your wildest dreams, and you begin to realise that alcohol isn't the be-all and the end-all for everything in order to enjoy life.
You're a wonderful advocate for so many aspects of life, and particularly for the gay community and also for people recovering from alcoholism. But let's talk about the life that you have at the moment. You're also the epitome of manners and style, and those kinds of things are very important to you, aren't they, Noel?
I believe one thing I most certainly took from my parents. My mother was glamorous insofar as she never went out to go to mass or to the shops without looking the part, you know.
That's where you got it from.
She made the best of a bad lot. And she had friends in America, and she'd be looking forward to the odd parcel coming.
Oh, yeah.
And she had a sister-in-law in London who used to send the odd beautiful coat and scarf. My father was very dapper too. And I say my father just missed out on life because he just
So he hadn't
was
the
trapped.
chance of education or
Absolutely.
anything.
He was trapped. He wanted to be a teacher so badly and did the exam and was accepted and all of that. And then that all came crashing down around him. And also, I believe that in my business, which is hospitality, I'm in the public eye a lot. That's been my life. Hotel life is stage, theatre, in its very purest form. It's lights, camera, action. And, you know, you want to go and meet someone who looks the part and is the part. And
But someone who's gracious and mannerly, which you are.
And I just bemoan the fact that we've become more vulgar.
Coarse.
And more coarse, that nothing seems to matter. And, you know, I just always tend to use that example of, you know, my sisters and my brothers, I've bought them all a milk jug because I do not want to see a milk carton on the table. It's a small thing, but it's okay.
But you've written a book.
Yes, and I wrote a book on manners because I believe that the way we treat people will invariably be the way we are treated ourselves. And manners, you see, it's quite simple. It's all about respect. It's respect for you, Mary McAleese, respect for you, Mary Kennedy, respect for myself. And I would never want anybody to say he was coarse or vulgar. And it's so much nicer to do nice things and do it well. And, you know, if you're having dinner, set the table a little bit. You know, people come to my house sometimes when I'm having a bite to eat. They say, "No, do you set up the table like that?" I said, "Yeah." But why? Well, I said, if I get into the habit of having it on a tray in front of the television, I said, the next thing I'll be in my pajamas and I'll be in my dressing gown. You know, then I won't bother shaving for a few days because I'm just around the house. So it's just, I believe manners matter. And Diana, the Princess of Wales, had impeccable manners. She was
reared to that, wasn't she?
It's like Her Majesty the Queen, whom you hosted so beautifully in our country. I mean, you know, she never put a foot wrong. She was so gracious. And the story, it was her mother who told the story about when one of the visiting heads of state mistook the finger bowl that it was something they drank from, and the Queen followed by drinking from it in order not to embarrass
the guest.
You know,
That's
her
nice.
guests.
That's,
And I have no reason to disbelieve that. Her breeding, you know, or the breeding. Donegal always say it's all about the breeding. And God knows it's a nice badge of honour to carry. You know, that when you see people and they have very little, and yet, no more than ourselves, we were brought up in Donegal. We didn't have the shoes on our feet at times. We had no gadgets. We had no screen time. We had no mobile phones. We didn't, I mean, a trip to Donegal town would have been like going to Dublin.
It's in your veins, and you promote Donegal. So, you're Donegal Person of the Year in 2019.
I remember that. That's right.
I'm very privileged to be that, and as luck would have it, they couldn't take it away from me from several. Well, no more than Uachtar in the hair, and you live with it forever.
Yes.
COVID struck, so I was Donegal Person of the Year officially for a number of years. Now the wonderful Moya Brennan is carrying that gorgeous title.
But you promote Donegal so beautifully and so earnestly.
Well, yes, but you know, look, the company I'm in today, Mary, you with Nationwide, you promoted Ireland, every county, with love and respect and enthusiasm and excitement. Mary McAleese, you know, one of the presidents that will go down in history. I mean, you wore your office with pride. And, you know,
thanks, Noel.
And it's the same in Donegal. If you haven't that pride of place and pride in your people and bang the drum as powerfully as possible.
How did you get involved in the Today Show? All the way to Cork?
Actually, I've been in and out of bits and pieces of television. It all began with Diana, the Princess of Wales, actually.
Did it?
Because somebody saw a picture of her and I together, and then Virgin Media asked me would I comment on something, and then I was in and out to them for several years on the Ireland AM show down the years, and I did lots of bits with RT down the years too, and sure, do you know what, there's not many 70 plus gay men in loud suits and
very elegant
and purple hankies and sort of slingbacks, that are available at the toss of a hat. And it's all a bit of fun, isn't it? Lovely to engage with people. And as I say, I'm reliving a lot of the opportunities I missed because I was in the depths.
And also, as I suppose an ambassador for Donegal, you had the honour of hosting King Charles. Was he king at the time?
No, he was Prince of Wales then. And, Donegal, the diamond was bathed in sunshine, the castle, the whole town looked amazing. People came out in their thousands. They were so welcoming and so warm, and the prince, the now king, and his wife were utterly charming in every way. And we had great fun. At one stage, we were strolling along and he dwelled overlong with one group of ardent women fans, and she gave him an almighty dig to get him to move on. And I said, under my breath, I said, Mom, I spotted you doing that. So she got the giggle. She's a great, she loves giggling. And then I started to giggle, and he turned around and he says, what are you two laughing at? I said, sir, keep going, move on. He was just lovely. Yeah. And I was very proud because for me, as you both know, there would have been a time not many years before the thought of having the Prince of Wales stroll round Donegal town. It would have been unheard of. And he turned to me, he said, let me tell you, Mr. Cunningham, Mama always had a wish that before her dying days she would get to visit the Republic of Ireland. And he said when she came back, she regaled the family with story after story she so enjoyed. Well, you saw it.
She did.
She was glowing and beaming.
She had the time of her life.
Yes.
Literally the time of her life.
Yes.
And she did say publicly that in all this, at that time, I think over 60 years of service and 60 years of state visits, it was the best state visit she ever made.
Well.
And you're also best pals with Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh, she is the most kind and wonderful young woman, and
she's a neighbour.
A neighbour and a dear friend, absolutely, like yourselves. And had it not been for the fact that she had so many commitments, she would have been there for the 70th, but we'll leave it for the 80th.
I can't wait.
Wouldn't it be lovely, I often think, not just for me it would be particularly lovely to be able to sit my mother and father down and tell them my journey like I've spoken to both of you.
But you know that they're involved in it. You do believe in the communion of saints. Of course you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the only reason I go into Kilcar graveyard on a regular basis, to make sure the flowers on the grave are perfect.
You do?
She would haunt me. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you also honour your parents' memory with the wonderful relationship that you have with your nieces and your nephews and grandnieces and nephews now. That's very important, isn't it, Noel?
It has been such a joy to know my nephews and nieces and to love them and to be loved in return. And it's indescribable. And particularly after a journey that I did, with that comes the sadness that I didn't have Mary just to talk to, that we could have had one day to explain my side of the story. But she understands it. She
better than anybody.
She instigated my recovery through her beloved daughter, yes.
So it was a gift from her, really, from beyond the grave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you ever wish you had children of your own?
I think, yes. I think a lot of gay people, there are people who never wish to have a family, and that's their, I respect that totally. But like heterosexual people, I think a huge number of gay people have those maternal and paternal leanings too. They would have liked to have a child. So all of that energy is around my nephews and nieces and my grandnephews and nieces.
If there was one thing in life that you could change, whether it's in your own life or an Irish life or the world right now, what would it be? If there was something you could change.
Mother Teresa once said, now St. Therese, she spoke of our inability to forgive and how we carry that baggage. You know, we are so good at saying, no, it's all right, and yet deep down we haven't forgiven unconditionally. And I often think of Mother Teresa, those words that, oh, that we would be able to forgive. And it's a nice thought. And then Pope John Paul I, I remember the day he died, the smiling Pope. Remember he only reigned for 32, or yes, if that, yeah, even. And whatever, I think he was reading St. Thomas Aquinas in bed that night when he died, and it had opened at the page where the thought for that particular chapter was, oh, that we would have spent today thoroughly well, or that we would spend one day, thoroughly well. Just to have a day where we did, in all our interactions, that we were good people, that we reached out and that we left selfishness and all of that at the door, and because we live in the most fractured world.
Yeah, and that chimes very well with the whole fellowship idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Of concentrate on this minute, this day, this hour.
Yeah.
Do good in this time.
Yes. And I would not wish in any way to have my halo adjusted. I don't want to be holier than thou, but just that wish that we would just learn to forgive in all areas of our lives. Yeah.
Excellent. That's lovely out. Excellent.
No.
Well done.
Can you give that last line once more, Noel? Just your microphone, I think you touched it. Just as you were saying it. But that ability to forgive, just that last line, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, if you just give that once more. And 3, 2, 1, and go ahead.
And earnestly, I suppose, if only we had that ability as individuals to forgive.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Changing Times here in Allenwood.
We'd love to express our gratitude, as always, to our researcher, Anne-Marie Staunton.
And a big thank you to our producer, Enda Grace.
We're also deeply thankful to Kildare County Council for their ongoing support and sponsorship.
So be sure to subscribe to Changing Times and spread the word among your friends.
So until next time, from Allenwood in County Kildare, Slánagriff.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.